Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome once again to another Thursday night and the Sports Crib, home of the Sports Crib Network. Well, the playoffs are alive and well. We have two games Saturday and two Sundays. We'll definitely be talking about those things. A couple other headlines, but I see Mr. Carroll is in the queue. Uh, Mike Valverde will join us during our call session here. I think Bill is asleep on us. Bill, wake up. Mr. Carroll. Let's let's call him. Maybe we'll wake him up here. Call Bill Carroll. Call Bill Carroll.
Yeah. Oop, there we go.
Yeah, you might want to wake up. We're on the air.
Yeah, well, I was in you for a while. Later,
The many faces of Bill Carroll. Looks like you were just getting off work there. I see you just loosened up the tie.
Yep.
So,
and getting ready to do a show.
All right. Well, how's the weather there in Chicago?
It was about, I think the high was about 13, something like that.
13. Sounds like a shoe size, not a temperature.
Yes, indeed it does.
Not a temperature, especially since I moved from Pittsburgh. It's like
Yes, I'm sure you have lost a frame of reference.
Bill, I call it California cold. 53 degrees.
Yes,
It's
right.
my
Yes.
threshold. It's like
yeah. They have a whole different, people talk about, oh, it's, if it gets down to 50, people start to wonder if they should go outside.
But I did go to Dallas, as I mentioned, over the Christmas holidays, and it was 70 then. But since then, Texas has received its justice, and it's cold as hell. I guess that's. But Bill, I know this is something that you've definitely had some contact with, whereas a lot of us kind of it might have went by us or went over our kind of went under the radar with all the things that are happening in the NCAA, especially with the NIL and the portal and things like that. But the NCAA has decided to let schools independently decide what to do about transgender in sports.
Yep.
Now, to me, this, being kind of old school here, this kind of sets up a can of worms because there's no every school could have a different rule.
Yes, correct. And it's because the NCAA looked at it and said, we'd rather not be involved. I mean, that's really what happened. It's that simple. Because there's so many different things from a legal and social and ethical standpoint that can be, and even scientific standpoint that could be in play, they decided, nope. I mean, it's that simple. They decided, nope. Okay, let's look at the International Olympic Committee, right? Who do and are involved in sort of regulating things around gender. Now, to the point that there are some, cis women, born women, who just happen to have elevated levels of testosterone just naturally. And they literally will either bar them from competition or make them take hormone blockers. So unless you want to go to that extent, which thus far the NCAA has shown absolutely no inclination, you're going to have to first define exactly what transgender means in the terms of your organization. And then you have to define who is and who is not based on whatever definition that you put in place. And then you have to have a policy that deals with all the different permutations of gender. And so the NCAA took a long, hard look at it and said, nope. And they said, member institutions, you figure it out, right? You figure it out. Whatever it is you want to do, however it is you want to do it. They just threw their hands up basically and said, you guys figure it out. It's that simple.
And do you foresee, some of the do you kind of foresee this as I do as maybe a Pandora's box? I mean,
here's how I see it.
Here's where I'm going with this, because we've had high school and other sports, especially in southern states, try to ban or restrict these athletes.
Yes.
So if you're college in a Bible Belt state, as opposed to a college in, say, liberal California here, you could have a whole different,
or even just beyond location. Schools like Liberty University, schools like, there's gonna be schools that were founded by, evangelicals, right? They're going to have a very, 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 very different approach. Now, one could say that through the sort of the law of self-selection, is it likely that a trans athlete's going to go to a school like Liberty? Probably not. But it's going to get interesting if somebody decides whether they do it as a sort of an activism thing.
Well, it could be a school that Liberty is competing against.
Sure, and Liberty would then have to decide to forfeit or compete. I mean, that's the decision you have to make at that point. So, I mean, you and I are both old enough to remember when the question wasn't gender, the question was color. It wasn't that long ago. Within my lifetime, SEC, right, took its first scholarship Black athletes in my lifetime. Like, I remember it. I remember Nat Northington. I remember, like, it wasn't that long ago, to me at least. So this is something that is okay. So you asked about the Pandora's box or can of worms. The flip side of that is, if you deny a class of people the opportunity to compete because of their gender, think about that can of worms. Think about the box you've opened at that point and the massive lawsuit that you'll be fighting for however long. So I completely understand. I'm not going to say I support or defend, but I completely do understand the NCAA deciding, we're going to kick this can not just down the road, but off the road, onto your road. You guys figure it out, right? And to an extent, while I won't call it exactly an admirable or courageous decision, it's a very logical one. Because if the NCAA decides to weigh in, whichever side or however they decide to weigh in, they then have to be the ones that bear the brunt of the who knows how many legal challenges they'll face, right? Thousands, I'm assuming, of legal challenges. So now it's on them. That means their attorneys. That means their assets are the ones that are on the line if there's a massive class action lawsuit. I can easily see somebody saying, do we want to deal with this? And someone saying, oh, no, we do not. Nope. And from that point forward, some bright member of their legal counsel or whoever it was said, hey, here's an idea, guys. Why don't we let individual institutions set their own policies regarding this? And then we pull a Pontius Pilate and wash our hands. That's what I think.
It's interesting when you say you remember within your lifetime, because remember within my lifetime, I remember Bear Bryant saying he would never recruit a black man, a black player.
Well, he wasn't alone. I mean,
no,
like
LSU, the LSU defense, what would they call the Black Bandits? And they were all
Chinese bandits. They still play the music.
Yeah.
They no longer call them the Chinese bandits, but they still play the music. You can still hear the music. Dun, 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 dun. And they no longer tell you why they're playing it, right? Because they scrapped the name a few years ago due to public pressure.
And not only wasn't there a black student there probably wasn't a Chinese student there either. If I can,
but whether there were or there weren't, they weren't concerned about their feelings. I'll tell you that much.
No, I mean, try to get a scholarship to the University of Arkansas if you were a black guy, in 1972.
That's what I'm saying. Like all of this, it's funny because there's certain things that are points of demarcation in people's lives. And so if you're a person who's, I guess, 40 or less, you think this is a long time ago, right? You and I are both old enough to remember when all of the quote unquote big time programs are pretty much all white with the exception of the Big Ten, the Northwestern, USC, UCLA. Like the West Coast school, had a very good number of black athletes on, all the money making sports going back, quite some time. The Big Ten has been fairly integrated going back really, over 100 years in some cases. I mean, Bobby, a long list of others were stars in the Big Ten. Obviously, Jack Trice, right? They named the stadium after him, and when he was at Iowa State and died shortly after a game. But it was very regional. I mean, Syracuse was an absolute powerhouse. Why? Because they took black athletes that lots of schools didn't, right? A lot of these black athletes from Georgia and Virginia and, South Carolina would end up at places like Syracuse and end up at places like they'd either end up at the black schools at South Carolina State or Jackson State and Grambling and Maryland Eastern Shore, right? Here's something you want to win a bar bet. Throw a few shekels on the counter of your local bar or whatever, and say who can tell me what school put the most starters between the both teams facing each other in a Super Bowl, right? What school, what institution had the most members of the combined starting lineups between two teams facing each other in the Super Bowl? I promise you, unless this person is one, a huge HBCU fan and or a football historian, you're going to win that one, right? This answer is Maryland State, though it's now known as Maryland Eastern Shore, in Super Bowl III, right? Emerson Boozer, Charlie Stoops. I used to know all five of them. There was an offensive lineman. And then another defensive back. I'll look it back up again. But yeah, so between the two teams that faced each other in Super Bowl III, there were 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 starters, right, between the two teams from Maryland State, as it was called. It's now called Maryland Eastern Shore. It's a football program, dropped football in like 1983 or 84 or something. But because they couldn't afford to keep playing, But so it's amazingly ironic that that was a little powerhouse at one point. This little teeny tiny school in Princess Anne, Maryland, hardly bigger than a postage stamp. Art Shell, right, being probably the most famous, but Roger Brown was a great player. And I guess the other sort of famous football player who's not famous for football, Clarence Clemens, played football there as well, who most people know from the E Street Band. But the fact is that a lot of these schools that became powerhouses in certain parts of the country that did recruit black athletes when the schools in the South didn't, began to lose some of that powerhouse status once those Southern schools started recruiting black students to play football and basketball and all the other sports. So that sort of took some of these other programs down a peg that used to have sort of exclusive franchise, at least amongst predominantly white institutions, to black athletes. So many of the people's fears about trans athletes are largely unfounded. So, as you may remember, or maybe don't remember, there was a trans woman who competed in weightlifting. And not only did she not win, she didn't even qualify to make it to the finals. I mean, like, she was eliminated very early on. People's assumptions that automatically trans athletes are going to just be dominant has been proven over and over and over and over again to simply not be the case. There are not trans athletes dominating really in any sport. They're not dominating track and field. They're not dominating rugby. They're not dominating softball or basketball or any ball you want to name. They're not dominating. One, because there are very small numbers of these athletes competing. That's the first thing. Like, it's not like there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them who compete at a high level. That's just simply not the case. The second thing is that despite people's fears and beliefs and whatever about, these quote unquote natural advantages, and while there is some, biological factors that people bring up and that are factual, that there's something to it, the fact is that the vast majority of world-class athletes, male and female, world-class athletes are people who were born, CIS, consistent, with their sex. That 99.9999997% of the world-class athletes are not trans. I mean, like, it's sort of a problem that doesn't exist that people are very worried about. So I understand why people, mostly, I guess, sort of religious and whatever boundaries that sort of they're born on the other side of. I get why people are worried and concerned or whatever, but it really is like such a minor problem. If you consider it a problem, it's such a minor problem that if that's what you're concerned about, you must have nothing else going on in your
life. I totally agree. It's I want to kind of equate it to another piece of nonsense, but I'll leave that for a Monday show.
Yes, we'll see that for a Monday show.
But we were talking about the portal and about how easy it is, now, for quality athletes that maybe went somewhere else before, now because of this and because of other things, we starting to see stars kind of fall in the line as to where, they can put their opportunities. We talked last week about Caleb
Williams. I mean, a long list of guys. Max Johnson, right? Brad Johnson's son, who was the starter last year at LSU. There's a long list. We could do an entire show.
Yeah. But I did notice that Jerry Rice's son,
Brendan Rice,
transferred from Colorado to USC.
Yes.
Now, is that the Kiffin effect? Here, because it's not that we got Lane Kiffin now. We've got a star on the bench.
I mean, Lane Kiffin's the coach at Ole Miss. I think you're talking.
Not Lane. Excuse me. Who am I talking about here?
Yeah,
Lincoln Riley. Yes.
Yeah. So here's the thing I will say regarding this. It's a combination of things. I don't know if you've been monitoring the state of affairs at Colorado, but by my count, they've had 23 players that played enough to letter in the 2021 or 2020/2021 season leave since the season ended. So they have not had a trickle they've had a outpouring of transfers from Colorado. That's part of it. Players have been, I mean, literally, if you monitor the portal, it seems like every day since the holidays, they've had a player transfer out. So that's the first thing I'll mention. Colorado has had a decent sized, like I said, steady, not even trickle, a steady flow of players leaving the program. That's the first thing I'll tell you. They've lost, I think, 3 former starters from their secondary have transferred out. Brendan Rice is just the latest to leave Colorado. His brother went to UCLA. So I guess, part of it's that sort of, I don't want to say sibling rivalry, but, his brother went to UCLA, and I guess it gives him a chance to sort of, one, frankly, be at a program on the rise. And yes, some of that is because of Lincoln Riley. And some of that because USC is USC. I mean, if you can't sell playing at USC to somebody, you probably shouldn't be recruiting. I mean, the campus is quite beautiful. And how do I say this, James? And things that are adjacent to the campus are quite beautiful. And there's a lot of talent at the USC campus, James. A lot of talent on that campus.
My friend's daughter actually graduated from USC. She's a USC alumni. And I can tell you, I mean, you talk about the USC network, just being a part of that network.
They have a tremendous alumni network. If you want to work really in anything, even tangentially related to the entertainment field, it's a great place to be. The campus, as I said, is truly beautiful, and some of the sites of the campus beyond the campus itself are truly inspiring as well. In case you're wondering, the place is not a hard sell, James. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
It's Southern California, man. I mean, hey, I'm 110 miles away.
Right. That's my point. It's in Southern California, and it is the quintessentially Southern California college campus. You know what I'm saying? No offense to UCLA, no offense to Pepperdine, no offense to San Diego State or whoever he wants to mention. If you wanted to shoot a movie that took place on a Southern California campus, the campus you would choose, no offense to any of the others, would be USC's campus. It literally looks like what people who live other places think a Southern California college campus looks like. That's what people have in mind. The thing they're imagining is USC. So,
and the movie studio is right down the street.
So my point is that USC has never been a hard sell. Even when in the quote unquote down years, they get a lot of top-notch players. You add to it that they have a coach that people think is going to win a national championship there sometime in the next 3 years. You add to it they're upgrading the facilities, which, I mean, I don't know if you know, the facilities weren't exactly bad at USC before. I mean, like the facilities I had at a Division II HBCU, we made the transition from Division II to 1AA is what it was called those days while I was there. But still, like it was above high school level, I will say that much, but it was definitely nothing like but the stuff that they're throwing away at USC, we would have gladly taken. I'll put it that way. Whatever they're getting rid of, we would have been thrilled to accept. So they're upgrading the facilities at USC, no less, right? School where essentially money is no object for, well, any of their programs, quite frankly, let alone football. So when you're able to put money into your water polo, I mean, they do a dominant water polo, right? They have things that, well, obviously it's Southern California, but they have sports there that people don't have other places anyway because it's Southern California. And then they dominate, meet Stanford or whatever, are also really good some of these, non-revenue
The
producing.
lacrosse program's pretty good too. It's not like a
Yeah,
Maryland
they got a bunch of, yeah, and
Or
of course
John
they
Hopkins, but I mean,
right. And Rod Dedeaux made the baseball Hall of Fame, the College Baseball Hall of Fame. They had a great baseball program there for a long time. Freddie Lynn and a long list of others. But the point I'm making is that, one, I'm not saying that it's all Lincoln Riley. Obviously, Lincoln Riley helps. But if you were to show a young man thinking about changing schools around USC's campus, I guarantee he's at least going to want to listen to what you have to say. I guess what I'm trying to tell you. He's at least going to be paying attention when you talk to him about his opportunities there. That's always been the case. Like, if you get them on campus and they get to walk around, you've got a fighting chance. Even if USC is down, like this, down in terms of whatever's happening. I have no doubt that Lincoln Riley will win and will win very quickly at USC. But it doesn't hurt that USC kind of sells itself is what I'm saying, to a certain amount. And then Lincoln Riley is the cherry on top. That's what I would say about Lincoln Riley. He's the cherry on top. If a kid is having to make a tough decision between schools that he has sort of equally ranked, Lincoln Riley helps. But there's a whole lot of kids that once they get on that campus are like, where do I sign?
Yeah. All you have to do is, well, that, what do you think about the University of Texas? Do you think Sarkisian is on the hot seat if he doesn't win next year? I mean,
Well,
Texas is
I mean,
they're not very patient with their coaches.
right. No, they're not. But they also realize they're about to become a place where they have a reputation of being toxic. So they can't fire Sarkisian right away. They're going to give him more chances than they gave somebody like Osei, Charlie, or Mizi. Here's what I will say. It's Texas, and I wish Don were here. All the jokes about that they have about, football, God, or God in football, it's not always in that order. God, guns, and football, or whatever. All those jokes that they have about that. I mean, there's a reason those jokes exist about Texas, James. I mean, it's you know what I mean? Like, it's not all exaggeration. I mean, there's exaggeration there, but there's not like there's a good
True story, Bill. Now that you mentioned when I went, I mentioned that I went to Texas for Christmas. I went Christmas Eve and I stayed through the 27th, and I was staying at a retirement home, for retired people around my age or older,
Sure.
and and of course, I wore my airborne shirt down there, and
Right.
just and I'm standing at the elevator, and a couple walks up to me. They're about in their early 80s, and they say, well, how are you? And we haven't seen you around here. Did you come to visit someone? Just normal kind of conversation. And I said, well, I'm just visiting someone and I'm from California. They said, well, you should move to Texas because here you can carry guns all that you want, and you can and that was the first thing they mentioned. You can carry a gun. We love our
Yep.
football. And I'm in the Dallas area, and of course the Dallas Cowboys. So like you said, guns, football, and religion. it's,
Yeah.
it's
It's like I said. I mean, we make jokes, but there's a really solid, foundation of truth underneath a lot of it. So they know that they're dangerously close to becoming a program that, I mean, I'm not saying that people will stop wanting to take the job because it's Texas. People will still take calls when Texas calls. But it's become a less attractive job if they keep firing coaches. So, I mean, after blowing through people like Charlie Strong very, very quickly and giving Tom Herman a little more of a chance, they realized they made a strong commitment financially and other ways to Sarkisian. I think they're going to give him. I mean, I'm not saying he'll automatically finish out the length of his contract, but he's not getting fired after 2 years. I promise you that. And he's probably not getting fired after 3, quite frankly. I mean, it would take something extraordinary, like starting the season 0-6 or something. Then he gets fired before he finishes his 3rd year. But anything short of an absolute disaster, if they're showing any sort of progress, 7 wins, 8 wins, if they're and it looks like the needle's pointed up, he'll be fine. I'm not saying they become patient because that they won't do that, but they become somewhat reasonable because they realize, like I said, coaches are going to be more and more skittish about taking this job if they keep firing coaches so quickly.
Well, it all depends on what the University of Oklahoma does, because if Oklahoma keeps kicking their ass,
right. Well, yeah, the two things are interconnected. You're correct. I mean, if OU wins the national championship, they'll never hear the end of it.
Oh yeah! Oh my goodness! Yeah. Whoever's the Texas coach would probably get fired that season for real. If Oklahoma won a national championship while Sarkisian is there, I almost guaranteed he'd be out with the bathwater. But let's talk a little NBA and the Lakers. There's a lot of people say that Frank Vogel is on the hot seat. And I mean, frankly, I understand, but Frank Vogel wasn't the one that went out and got Russell Westbrook. But that's a different that's a whole different kettle of fish.
As young players that could have been Lakers are beginning to emerge around the league. If Kuzma continues to improve, Andrew Wiggins continues to improve, D'Angelo, Russell, like there's a bunch of guys. Oh, and what's Brandon Ingram, right?
Yeah, I mean, Ingram has become a fantasy standout.
Right, so that's my point. This team could use 4 young, athletic players for running stars, desperate, right?
Yeah.
As I've talked about before.
It could use 2, but
they could use 2. They could use. That's the point I'm making. They could use 2, but they could really use 4.
Right, the 4 and the 4 that you're talking about were all on the Lakers roster at one time.
That's my point. That's the point I'm making. Is that all 4 of those players are players the Lakers could have literally on the team right now, this very minute. And I mean, I get the win now mentality. I really, really do. I get it. I understand it. But the problem,
is it a coaching change that they need to get back on track?
Well, who are they going to hire, James? It's going to magically make this team younger. Like I don't understand this team. At least because the team is so veteran, the impact of coaching is lower than a younger team because
wait a minute, hold on. You cannot fire LeBron.
Well, no.
Okay.
You won't.
You can't fire, and you're not going to hire. You're not going to fire your GM. So the buck has to stop somewhere.
Right.
And usually the head that falls is that of the head coach.
And maybe that's what happens. To do what? Who's coming in? Who's the magician that you bring in that makes this team deeper and younger? I mean, help me to understand what magical coaching name, who's walking through that door?
This is the same argument that we have when we start talking about football coaches, which we'll get into later on. Who are you going to bring through that door that's better? But yet and still, you're below 500, and you have a star-studded roster,
right?
That on paper should be right up there. I mean,
in 2011 or 12, you'd be right.
Well, now wait a minute, hold it now. If you take LeBron James, AD, and
Mhm.
Russell Westbrook on paper. This sounds like a dynamic trio. Didn't work out. But
Well,
I mean,
even on paper, it sounds like a dynamic trio that need to soak a lot after,
right, right.
day games after night games. I I I said this at the time, James, right? When this first happened, when they made the first made the deal for Westbrook, I said, "Oh, they looked at this aging roster and said, "No, we need to do get older." Right? I I said it at the time. I predicted this would not work out at the time. This is not news to me that the oldest team in the NBA is struggling. That doesn't surprise me one bit. Basketball is a sport where you certainly can win with older players. Don't get me wrong, but you have to have some up and coming younger players. Your team can't just be aging superstars. That has been proven not to be a recipe for success long term. It has consistently been proven that at some point, old players break down. This isn't some wild theory. This has been proven over and over and over and over and over again. Eventually, the late 80s, early 90s, Celtics began to break down.
See, once again, it kind of goes back to how long you've been watching things because, this kind of seems like a rehatch of the Karl Malone, Gary Payton
Yep,
experiment.
yep.
Remember that?
I remember it all too well. And people, just like this time, people were like, oh, this is surely going to be a championship. Look at all that star power. And my first thing I said that time was, oh my gosh, are they old? And the issue with that is one, guys wear down. And two, this whole thing can only last but 1 to 3 years, 3 at the most, because these guys are going to start to retire. So I went on the record saying I didn't think it was long term smart to get rid of. We just went through a litany of young basketball players that were on the line. If they had held on to every single one of them, right, they would have LeBron, those young guys I just mentioned, um, and probably a sprinkling of other sort of mid level talents, and they'd be, maybe not dominant, but they would be probably 8 or 9 games above 500. I mean, the decision to just consistently get older and then fix your problems you had the year prior where your team was the oldest and then get even older still. I don't get why it is somebody didn't realize this was not a good idea.
Well, like you said, you've been consistent about that, and so have a lot of others. So, but you know, uh, Sir Charles said, and he had another different issue with the Lakers today on TNT, but yesterday he was saying that these Philadelphia 76ers are wasting Joe Embiid's great season because they refuse to get rid of Ben Simmons.
I mean, he's not altogether wrong. Um, Once again, a young, I don't know if I use the term superstar exactly, but he's a very talented player who has size, movement skills, passing and defensive ability. And as I said before, he's just one thing away from being truly great, and that's the ability to shoot the basketball, of course. If not for that, right? If he knew how to shoot the basketball. But he's got everything else. There are teams where he would work, I think, particularly teams where they already have enough scoring, right? If your team has more than enough scorers, but struggles on the defensive end, struggles with people who can make plays, he's a versatile, long defensive body who, despite being as big as he is, can lead the break. I mean, I get why people are attracted to him. I was never sold on him because of the whole not being able to shoot thing, but there are people who still really like him. He still has value. They should move him. And I think they're just waiting for somebody to meet their price.
It would be nice if you could make layups and free throws, though.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's clearly from a mental block with him at this point, and maybe it'll unblock at some point. Who knows? These things sometimes happen.
I mean, you have to be grateful when you're a basketball player that's earning millions of dollars and you can't shoot.
No.
I mean, I, I really don't fault Ben. I mean, even though he's getting fined every day, but he's still on the roster. So,
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't blame Ben, but I'm getting kind of like Sir Charles. I mean, hey, is Sacramento calling? Well, if they aren't, maybe we should call them. Is Houston calling? If not, maybe we should call them. But okay. Let's see.
It even makes sense with a team. Even makes sense with a team like the Nets because they certainly have enough shooters, but they could use length, they could use defense, they could use someone who can run, and he can do all
But
that.
but can they absorb that salary? The Nets.
Well, no, not really. No.
I'm thinking of places where they can call and like actually have my OKC. Not,
Right? Yeah,
not,
they'd
not,
have to. They'd have to do a deal where they also sent some salary back. But yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, that's the thing. There's a handful of teams that could use him, and you're right. Only a handful, even a smaller handful of teams that can both use him and afford it. Yeah, that's.
Yeah. We saw Embid the other night. He dropped 50 points in like 27 minutes. During that same night, I watched the Denver game. I believe Jokic in overtime. He had 46 or 48.
47 or 46.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then you had Antetokoumpko, the Greek Freak.
Yep, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Yeah.
Yeah, all on the same night.
Yep.
These guys and these guys to me are true fives.
Yeah.
Okay.
To some extent, the last of the true fives in the NBA, but yes, they are. They're real, actual, honest to God centers.
So, we asked this about point guards. If you had to pick one to start your team, which one are you taking?
I'm still taking Giannis. One, because he is the best pure athlete of the three. Two, I think he works harder than the other two. Not that Jokic doesn't. Well, Embiid's work ethic has improved as well. All of them work hard, but I think Giannis works the hardest of them. And I guess the other thing is Jokic is a really good offensive player, right? A terrific offensive player. Embiid is a terrific offensive player and a pretty good defensive player. Giannis is now an elite, and has been an elite, like rare, elite level defender, and he's now become a very good offensive player. I think he's the most balanced also of all the three.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with you, even though I think Embiid is the flashiest, mainly because he's one of those guys that makes sure that he's out there, or maybe it's because of the absence of Ben Simmons.
Right. Well, he has a big personality. He has a podcast. I mean, he has probably a clothing line, I'm guessing. I don't know. But he's a very social media savvy guy. He's bright and funny, and he's in a major media market. And no offense to Milwaukee, but it's not quite the same. And Giannis, obviously, this is his, I guess, third language. In English,
at least,
right? I mean, he speaks a bunch of languages, but I think he learned English third or maybe fourth, but I think third of all the languages he learned. So he's now fairly in fact, he's now very comfortable in English, but he's still, a guy who's not 1,000% fluent. Like he's 92.5% fluent in English at this point, which is super impressive because he knows three other languages. But he's not quite the same, ready to go pitch man that a guy like Embiid is. I guess is what I'm saying.
No. Uh, um, with Durant out indefinitely and Flat Earth playing part time and reinforcing once again that he's not going to get vaccinated. Are the Not Yet still the team to beat in the East?
No, and I never thought they were. I've been very consistent about this too, James. I said no. Every time you ask me about them being the team to beat the East, I say no. I will continue to say no. If they win the East, I will be grudgingly forced to, I guess, accept that. But at no point have I said this is the team that I thought was the best team in the East, and I stick to it.
Let's talk about some way too early awards here
Okay.
in the NBA. Rookie of the Year: Evan Mobley, Scottie Barnes, or, and I hate that Demetrius missed tonight,
Right.
Cade Cunningham.
Yeah, well, I was going to say Cade Cunningham. I mean, Cade Cunningham to me.
Cade, yes.
To me,
I
Cade
always thought.
Cunningham is Rookie of the Year. Now, there are several, as you mentioned, really, this is what you love, obviously seeing young players develop and become budding stars. But the one who is the most spectacular, right? I mean, he is. Cade Cunningham is not a really good player, but he's also really fun to watch. And he's being asked to do more, frankly, than the others because, well, once again, sadly, Demetrius not here, but there's not a lot of, how do I put this? There's good players on that team, but most of them are, and what's my term, glue guys, right? Most of them are guys who are fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth kind of players. He's a potential number one, right? He may be the number one now, but if he isn't, he soon will be. He's a number one. He's a lead. He's a team captain soon. I mean, whatever term you want to throw out there, he's going to be the man if he isn't already the man in that program. And there's a little bit of a gap already, frankly, in my mind, between him and the next best player. The good news, if you're a Detroit Pistons fan, is you have now 2 or 3 solid structural pieces to build around. If they have another 2 really good drafts, they'll be a contender, at least on their side.
Hey, I wonder what that would do for basketball to have Detroit back up in among the number ones. I mean,
Right?
we kind of thought, after uh, we had a little fool's goal last year with the Knicks after they finished fourth. So a lot of people were thinking that they were on the rise, but as you can see, they're not. Defensive Player of the Year: Draymond Green, Rudy Gobert, Giannis, or somebody else.
I mean, it'll probably be somebody else, but my vote would still go to Giannis. But I guess at some point you get sort of bored with Giannis's level of defensive greatness. But he is a tremendous defensive player. Tremendous. Draymond is terrific too, don't get me wrong. I mean, Draymond will someday make the Hall of Fame, and it'll be 75, 80% because of defense. And deservedly so. He's
Almost, yeah.
probably one of the 3 or 4 best on the ball defenders of the past. I mean, in the post Gary Glove Peyton era. So, past 10, 15, maybe even years. There's only a handful of players is good on defense. It's Draymond. Giannis is one of them, obviously. So once again, my personal vote will go to Giannis, but it'll probably go to somebody else.
Most Improved Player: John Morant, Miles Bridges, whom I really like. I've been watching him in the last couple games, and Darius Garland. Of course, he he plays for the Cavaliers, so that could never be my vote. But
right. I mean, those are all strong candidates. I would probably pick Bridges. I mean, Morant was pretty darn good as a rookie, but he just keeps getting better. So if Morant wins it, it's sort of a, popularity contest as opposed to, I mean, as great as he is, this was stuff you really saw in him last year too. While Miles Bridges, production and minutes and everything are way up from the previous. I mean, from the previous.
Yeah, he's just become a much better overall basketball player.
Basketball
I think.
player, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think Bridges probably should win.
6-man. Tyler Herro, Kelly Oubre Jr., or Montrezl Harrell.
Once again, those are all really, really, really good.
Or someone else.
And once again, it's possible it could be somebody else. But of the group you've given, and the one that I think probably will actually win it, I think will be Tyler Herro. Tyler Herro has become. I mean, I'm trying to think of someone else to really compare him to. I mean, Lou Williams, or I'll tell you who he's close to. Not even so much Lou Williams. Oh my gosh, I just had his former Bull, I think the Bulls drafted him, I think. Marquette, another Marquette grad. Oh my gosh, I can see him in my mind. And he's just a terrific scorer. One season he's averaged a point a minute off the bench. He's won 6-Man of the Year award before. My gosh, I am blanking on his name like nobody's business. I was so mad when we let him get away when he was a Bull. Oh my gosh. Oh, it almost came back to me. He's like 6'6". Plays dark skin. Plays. Where does he play now? Hold on. He moves around a bit, though he's a really good player. Well, it'll come back to me. But yeah, of the list, I would vote for my vote would go to Tyler Herro.
The last couple years, they were talking about his consistency, and I've seen that come back. But whenever I think of anyone on the Heat, and I think of how or why they've become a good player or a better player, I have to kind of associate it with Jimmy Butler.
Jamal Crawford was the player I was trying to remember. Sorry. So, yeah.
I mean, there seemed to be. It seemed like Jimmy embraced Tyler from the beginning, even when there was a lot of criticism. Jimmy said, "Let him play," and back off more or less.
Well, Jimmy likes mentally tough players, right? That's why he has so much trouble. But yeah, he likes mentally tough players, and Tyler Herro is mentally tough. So I'm not shocked that he and Mr. Herro have become, fast friends or whatever term you want to use to describe what they are to each other. Attitude-wise, they have a lot in common.
What do you make of? Well, let's see. How would you want to put it? Have the Atlanta Hawks finally come back down to earth this year?
I mean, they couldn't keep playing at that level. That's not sustainable. So, I guess the technical answer is yes, but I think that they're still very much real, and they're going to heat back up again at some point. They're a good team. But yeah, winning at the rate they were winning at one point earlier in the year is not sustainable. Like I can't remember how long their winning streak was, but they had a very long winning streak that you just can't win every game, or you can't win 80% of your games even. Well, I guess you can. I guess that's about what the record is, but frankly, if you're winning 70% of your games, you're doing just fine, better than fine. But I think they'll be fine. I think that they'll keep back up.
You know, speaking of, and I gotta kind of go back to this because I think they lost to the Pacers last night after blowing a 15-point lead.
Right.
They lost to was it Sacramento?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They lost, and going back earlier, OKC. And the reason why I'm talking about it is because, as you pointed out, these are, the Lakers are old and these are younger teams. These teams usually, ran them down. As you saw the case last night, Indiana was getting to the basket at their leisure.
Yep.
But, I mean, is this just a complete mental breakdown by the Lakers? As well as perhaps that latest case of Absorbing Jr. didn't get to the trainer. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, and yes, age will always be a part of it when you're talking about this team because they are old. I mean, as I've said on many occasions, if your team is a very old team and the season goes on for a long time, and it does go on for a long time, at some point, you're going to have players that need extra rest. You're going to have team players that are going to have, strains and sprains and, bone bruises and, all the wear and tear injuries are all going to happen. And unlike players who are 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, where you just bounce right back, when you're 35, you need some time, Jay, to get back to feeling good again. So it is to be expected that, I mean, like I said, I've said all these things already, but this is an old team trying to play a very long season against younger teams. And sometimes, even when they have the more talent, they're going to get beaten just based on depth and energy. It's hard to, keep up with those young boys, Jay.
Yeah, there's no sergeant major coming through that door. It's
Nope.
So let's start a conversation here about the NFL, and hopefully Mike will join us. I just pinged him here, and there he is. See, right on time. There he goes.
Hello,
Hi.
gentlemen.
Hello, gentlemen. How you doing, Mike? What's going on?
I'm doing good. How about you guys?
We're doing great. I thought that we'd start off here on the NFL. Demetrius, as usual, is traveling, but we have some great questions here. And Mike, I'm glad that you're here. And I want to start out with, of course, we talked about it, and I was so glad to see my 49ers come through. But Stephen Jones, Jerry's son, says that he's confident that the Cowboys will retain Mike McCarthy as head coach next year. Mike, really? I mean, for real?
Well, I think it's hard to fire a playoff coach. And if he was, I mean, they had a chance Dak Prescott had a brain fart and forgot to slide when he should have slid. So I don't put that on the head coach. In fact, I think that was the correct call because they got 30 yards on that play, and if he just slid 2 yards closer, then they would have had a very good chance at a touchdown. So I think what Mike McCarthy's done as well is good. And I mean, there's always opportunities to go after other guys, but I think it's his second year, he's done reasonably well.
Bill, what's your thoughts here? Because you're always one of those guys. Well, if not so and so, then who?
Well, there's two reasons why I don't think anything's happening coach-wise in Dallas. One, as I think has been established, there are a lot of coaches that will never be interested in the Cowboys job because of the way that team is structured. Quick, everybody. Who's the general manager of the Dallas Cowboys? Right? Okay. So that is an uncomfortable feeling. That's an uncomfortable situation. And it rarely works out, quite frankly, when the owner is the general manager. The last person who was both an owner and a general manager to hoist the Lombardi was Al Davis. That was a little while back. It hasn't happened since. I don't know if that's going to work out, I guess is what I'm trying to say. However, because of that, only certain coaches will take this job. The last few coaches were guys that have been elevated from within, right? They elevated Jason Garrett from within the program, within the organization. And frankly, I'm trying to think of a top flight coach who would even interview for the job, right? I mean, the top coaches don't even interview for this job. Let's just be honest, right? That's despite this being a flagship organization, the most, in terms of revenue, the number one team in the sport, revenue-wise, right? They're winning that Super Bowl the last several years. Is the money. That's what the Dallas Cowboys. That's the Super Bowl they win. Is the Super Bowl of money. Maybe not of football, but of money, yes. So there's a lot of things that you think would make this, a really attractive spot, but there's that one thing that means that no top coach will take this job. Jerry Jones.
Yeah.
So as long as Jerry Jones continues to be both the managing general partner and the general manager, I think they're going to be scraping around, either taking lower level retreads, i.e. their current coach, or they'll go back to doing what they've done in the past, elevating coordinators. That's how they've been doing it for quite some time.
Yeah, very true. The Rangers, they fired their general manager, Maylock, after 3 seasons. Is this a Chucky fallout, or, because, they made the playoffs also.
Yep.
What's your thoughts, Bill?
Well, the first thing is they've made some mistakes in the draft. Now, not all of them have been mistakes. Obviously, Max Crosby's been a terrific young player. And while I think they sort of overspent for Josh Jacobs because he's a medium-sized, medium-speed, medium-talented running back, there's nothing about him that said, I've got to get this guy in the first 32 picks. He's exactly the kind of guy that you could get. He's basically James Robinson, who was an undrafted free agent. In terms of size, talent, speed, they're the same cat. But one guy went the first and one guy was an undrafted free agent. And, of course, the thing that sort of hung around Mike Mayock's neck was taking Clelin Ferrell as early as he did. Another guy that should not have gone in the first 75 picks, let alone the first 10 picks. And he became just what you expected. He's a hard worker. He's a football guy. He loves football. He's a good person. He's a good teammate. But he's essentially a rotational player right? While Max Crosby, who went several selections later in the same draft, is by far their best defensive player. So it's going, I mean, obviously the Antonio Brown thing, hey, anybody could make that mistake, right? Several teams have made that mistake. Teams keep making that mistake. So you can't really blame him too much for that. But they have not done a great job at the draft. And yes, he's associated to some extent with John Gruden. They were apparently friends and whatever. Frankly, this is a old-fashioned, I'll just say it's an old-fashioned program. They don't really understand or use analytics. It's an older program in terms of how they approach football. They don't have a lot of faith or commitment to innovation anymore, right? They used to be a fairly innovative program back, 60 years ago, I guess, or even 50 years ago. But football caught up to the Raiders, about 30-ish years ago or close to, and they slowly gave up that ground, slowly got less innovative, less forward-looking, so that by the time the mid-2000s rolled around, they went from being this program that was once sort of almost like a how-to, right? They seem to understand developing young coaches. They seem to understand how to get a lot of talent on the field and all sort of stuff. But the game passed the entire organization by, to be perfectly honest. And while I didn't wish any ill on Mike Mayock, I think he's a good guy. I love watching him on television. It is clear to me, one, like a lot of people who get promoted very rapidly to positions for which they have not had a lot of time to prepare. I mean, doing a draft TV show is not the same as being an NFL GM. And I love Mike Mayock, but he should have, frankly, worked in some slightly lower capacity before getting that job. Maybe done a year or two in player personnel. I mean, something. Like I said, I root for him. I think he's a great guy. But that was too much job for him, quite frankly.
Do you echo those sentiments, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the draft selections. You could go back. Alex Leatherwood this year, first round pick. Not. I mean, he should be a second, if not third round selection. Trevin Morik did okay. Divine Diablo was a part-time player. Nate Hobbs in the 5th round. That was a good selection. And then you go back to 2020, Henry Ruggs. Well, we know what he did. Damon Arnett. Well, we know where he's at. Lynn Bowden was not even a week starter for the Raiders. He got shipped off preseason to the Dolphins. Brian Edwards hasn't been anything. And then you go to 2019, as Bill pointed out, Clelin Ferrell, who's done nothing with them. Josh Jacobs has been okay. Jonathan Abrams been all right. Trayvon Mullen, and then Max Crosby. So it's almost like he nailed the later picks. Like he got Hunter Renfrow in the 5th round. So it's like all these later guys are Max Crosby, and all these guys are late in the pick. He's done really well, but when given the reins to do the 1st and 2nd and 3rd round picks, he's just completely fallen off. So it's really weird to me. I do believe it's also tied in with Chucky. Chucky hired him, and it's like, okay, if we want to get out of this, this is the time to do it. And I think that if Chucky had one more year in him, so would Mike Mayock. But it's just like, okay, Chucky's gone. Let's clean house. The draft history is not working for us to the extent that we want it to work. We're paying a lot of money to these guys who are complete busts. Let's just clean house and move on.
Mike, just looking at what happened last week in the playoff games, was it Odell or was it the Clowns?
I think Odell Beckham's definitely in a better position with the Rams because he has Matthew Stafford and he doesn't have Baker Mayfield. But is it to the extent that it's like, okay, can you blame this team or the player? Well, I don't see that much improvement out of Odell Beckham. So I would say it's the clowns that really had the most effect on his play. But Odell Beckham, even though he's catching touchdowns, that's all he's really doing, which is great. But can you count on it for an every game basis? I don't think so. So he's done better because he's in a better system, but that's not a direct reflection of his skills improving. I think the player is the same; they're just in a better position.
Well, I don't know, Bill. I might take a little exception to that because Odell wasn't brought in there to be a regular player. I mean, if the Rams' regular wide receiving core had been healthy, Odell probably wouldn't be there at all. As a matter of fact, he might be struggling to be there next year. So, I mean, Odell to me was brought there to catch touchdowns and to move the ball down the field. So I'll ask you, Bill, was it Odell or was it the clowns?
Yes. The answer to that, James. I mean, it's always a little bit of both, but clearly Baker Mayfield was trying to get the ball to Odell, sometimes too hard to get the ball to Odell. But Baker wasn't healthy at any point this past season. At any point. I mean, he was hurt all year. He was not healthy at any point. He got hurt in the preseason, if I remember something correctly, and was never completely right, never completely healthy. Had surgery, I think, 3 days ago, something like that, to fix that torn labrum. But frankly, and people have talked about how his numbers are better when he isn't throwing the ball to Odell. Some of that is structural, like the way that their offense is structured, and some of that is what Baker does best. And what he does best is not throw the ball deep and outside the numbers. That's not the best part of his game. That's just factual. That's not the best part of his game. He's a really good intermediate, and particularly intermediate middle of the field guy. He's really similar in a lot of ways in terms of where he does his damage to a guy like Teddy Bridgewater. Very different personality, but similar quarterback in terms of what his strengths are and what his weaknesses are. So what I think is going to happen to Odell Beckham Jr. is he's going to become the deep ball specialist once Robert Woods returns. They have their guy that dominates the middle of the field, and Higbee sort of helps out in that area, but that's really where Cooper Kupp kills you, right? He's the king of the option routes. Then you add in there Higbee, who's a pretty athletic, not elite athletic, but an above average athlete at the tight end position who catches the ball well.
Who's the rookie that got hurt? That's definitely going to be
You talking about Cam Akers, or are you talking about?
No. This is a wide receiver, rookie wide receiver.
You talking about Van Jefferson?
Yeah, Van Jefferson. I mean, I think all these guys are going to beat out Odell next year. There's another guy that Van Jefferson played this year. This guy didn't play.
The rookie that is Skornick. Are you talking about Skornick?
Yeah, I think that. Yeah.
Oh, Ben Skornick. Yeah, Ben Skornick. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he's sort of a big body possession guy. I mean, he does something very different from what Odell does. But
right, but if you got Jefferson, you got Woods, and then you have him. I mean, as a possession guy, I mean, is there going to be room for
right? But all the guys you named are guys that work 22 yards and shorter, right? Those are all. I mean, a couple of the guys are pure possession guys, and the other guys you named, some of them are decent athletes, but not blazers. The only guy of all the guys we've named so far who is a low 4.4s, that's still Odell. All the other guys named are 4.49 and slower, right? So, I mean, Robert Woods is the only other one that comes close to running, in the 4.4s, and I think he just barely made it at 4.49. So everyone else you're talking about is a 4.5s and up guy, right? So those aren't the guys that blow past people. That's not what they do. So he still has a role and a niche on the team because as I just mentioned, he's the only pure speed guy of all those Rams receivers.
Bill, all the talk about Harbaugh, but what about Quinn? Do you think that Quinn will get another head coaching job? I mean, he did take the Falcons to the Super Bowl, even though
He'll
they
get a
did
head
blow
coaching
it.
job again at some point. This is not that year, but it'll happen for him at some point.
Mike, what do you think? If not this year, when?
Yeah, it's always difficult, especially as your time goes on with assistant coaches, to fall into head coaching once again if it's not almost right away. I think that I think I agree with Bill. I think he'll get another shot just because look at what he's done with the Cowboys defense, and B, as you mentioned, Super Bowl head coach and has a very good resume. So he's the type of coach that will get another shot at the head coaching position, but I don't think it will be this year.
I was looking at an article on ESPN, and the article read that Rudolph and Haskins relish a chance to replace Big Ben. And I'm looking at the playoffs, which, as everybody knows, even though I'm a Steelers fan, I didn't think that they would make the playoffs because these two guys were our alternatives. I was an advocate of Haskins until he actually played a game. But my thing is this. I realized that it was Big Ben's last season and all that, but if you're really thinking about looking at these guys for next year, and you're down 42-14 in the fourth quarter, wouldn't you have taken that chance to give them a couple snaps? Mike, I mean, is it just me? I mean, because as far as I'm concerned, you could send both of these guys somewhere else.
Yeah, and I don't blame you. I think Haskins has or should have. I mean, I forgot what he did this year. Something. His immaturity level is just so high that I don't even know why he's still with the Steelers. But yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. The team's down so much, and you want to see what Haskins can do, what Rudolph can do. Let's throw somebody out there in a playoff pressure cooker and see how they respond. But I don't think it's done. I mean, I wanted to see how often a coach actually pulls his quarterback, and I can't remember. Maybe Bill knows, but I can't remember a time where, regardless of the situation, where the head coach has pulled their starter in a playoff game.
It doesn't happen, or rarely happens. About that.
But here's my thing, Bill, because I think that with the proper quarterback and a little tuning on the defensive end, we can get back in the playoff picture next year. So if you're not going to look at him under pressure cooker circumstances, when are you going to look at him?
Well, the first thing I'll say is I think they've seen enough of Mr. Rudolph. Quite.
I would assume so.
That's the first thing I'm going to say, that I think they have a pretty good read on what he is and is not. And the second thing I'm going to say is I don't think, due both to his study habits and probably the number of reps if you're a third string quarterback, you don't get a lot of reps. So for someone to say, I want to throw you out and see how you handle the pressure, that can turn a 42-14 game, which is obviously not a great score, but into like a 60-something to 14 game, right? Because if a guy doesn't really, really, really know the game plan and doesn't have a sense of timing with the receivers, that's how you get clusters of picks, James, right? Where every time he throws the ball, it's intercepted. That can happen. So I think they want Haskins to have a full preseason knowing he's in a quarterback competition and see how he handles it, see if he's growing up, see if he's maturing, see if he's learning the finer points, if he's figuring out leverage, if he's figuring out coverage, if he does all those things, I think he'll get a chance to compete for the job. But I don't think they're committed to anybody, really. I mean, and once again, this is just me talking. I don't need sort of insider information, but my guess is they go after one of the mid-priced, younger veteran free agent quarterbacks, and they draft one. And yes, they'll give these guys a chance to compete. Don't get me wrong, but they'll be more than happy to move on from them if they find something like that.
No, I Haskins, maybe you can give him time to compete, but Mason, you either get rid of him or if he hasn't learned the system by now and he hasn't grown within the system, then you have to move on from Mason. Haskins, maybe you can keep him another year, but I would get maybe a free agent veteran, and like you say, you drafted number 17, so I try to see how that works out. Bill, can or will the Texans trade Deshaun Watson?
If you're talking about ever, the answer is yes.
next season.
I think at some point next season, yes. I think it's going to take longer than people think it will take.
What's your take on that, Mike?
I don't know why they can't, but and there might be a reason.
Why they can't? Well, are you going to hire masseuse to come to his room? Or are you going? Are you going to put what restrictions are you going to put on him? You can't. There's a whole lot of restrictions that you'd have to put on. But so when you when you say can, will, I'm sure that they, might want to, but is there a team that's willing to take on that baggage?
Gotcha. I thought there might be an NFL restriction on what was happening, but as far as is what you're alluding to, absolutely. It's going to take a special team to sort of take on that responsibility and a vetting process. So, I think it's difficult. But this is the NFL, and it's about money, and it's about winning. And if they feel like he's going to better hide his fetishes or not do them, then there's an absolutely positive chance that Deshaun Watson will end up on another team. I don't see Deshaun Watson in Houston starting in week 1. That guy is out of there. And it's just going to be interesting to see where he actually lands. And it's going to be a select group to want to bring in that kind of situation.
I wonder if we're going to have a car situation in Houston next year. We'll see, though. I've just kind of got that in the back of my mind.
I still like Davis Mills. I think they give Davis – they started doing what you're talking about, where they named Davis Mills a starter, but they also draft the developmental prospect in like round 2, because that's really most of these quarterbacks, 99.9% of these quarterbacks are developmental prospects. They're not for sure things as we thought they might be with the last year's class.
Yeah, no, I don't think. But speaking of this year's class, and I'm going to add a couple teams in here because I wanted to know your thoughts on this, Mike. Will the Giants, the Saints, or the Broncos draft a quarterback in the first round?
Can I answer all of them?
Sure.
I think they all. I don't know if the Giants do. I think they sort of go like second round or third round, but the Saints, yes. I don't know if Jameis Winston's going to be there or not, and the Broncos most definitely are drafting a quarterback in the first round.
What's your thoughts on that, Bill?
So you said the Giants,
the Broncos, and who else was
Saints?
that? And the
Was
Saints.
it Saints, the other one?
Yeah.
Giants, Broncos, Saints. Yeah, I think all of them will draft a quarterback. The only question is where. I think.
No, I said in the first round.
Oh, they aren't all taking one in the first. No, because there's not that many first round quarterbacks. This is not that year. The Giants probably would be the most likely of that group. One is they pick early enough to get a shot at one of the quarterbacks that might be worth taking early. So the others don't. I don't think pick early enough. The Broncos are the other possibility. So I'll say 1.5, right? I think the Giants have a very strong possibility. And then the Broncos are a 50-50 coin flip. I don't think the Saints are taking a quarterback. Well, especially not the first. They may take a developmental quarterback later.
One of our favorite persons, Stephen A., said that Kingsbury never deserved being a head coach of the Cardinals. What are your thoughts on that, Bill?
Well, Cliff Kingsbury has truly had a charmed existence from, his movie star good looks to getting to coach Baker Mayfield and Patrick Mahomes in short order to, despite having 5 games below 500, whatever. I can't remember exactly what his coaching record was at Texas Tech, but it was not stellar. Falling upwards into an NFL starting job. I mean, it's really quite astonishing to see what's happened and how it's happened for this. It stands out. I'll put it that way, because you would have to be extremely lucky. I don't know. Yes. That.
Mike, should I go out on a limb here and say white privilege? No, I mean, it is criminal after dark. But what do you think, Mike? Did Kingsbury deserve a shot?
I mean, it's always white privilege when you have 99.9% of the league white coaches, but you always find that these coaches are the offensive genius of these coaches always get a shot. And I don't really know what he means by deserves. I mean, that's such a, I don't know, just a weird term to use. What do you mean? What does he mean by deserved? So it's one of those things that I'm holding out hope because I love to watch offensive genius work. But when you come to the pros, you either have to bring it or you don't. And Kingsbury has not. He's developed the team better. They're a better offense, but they're not to the extent that what he was at Texas Tech. And I was hoping Rondale Moore would shed some light and even develop that offense even more so. And that did not happen. So I want one more year at Kingsbury. He'll probably get it. But if the offense looks like it has looked in his last 3 years, this is his last season. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, yeah, I don't really like that comment. Does he never deserved? I mean, you can say that about like every single coach. Never deserved being a head coach.
Okay. I'm going to put you on the hot seat even more, Mike, because Mike Tomlin is now the only black head coach left standing after the 2021 season. In spite of the Rooney Rule and every other thing, I mean, we've seen Brian Flores. We're still all scratching our heads, I think, about that firing. But
correct.
What's your thoughts on that? After we talk about Kingsbury, I mean, do none of these guys deserve a break? Or I mean, what do you, like you say? What do you mean by never deserve? So, what's your thoughts when you look at the end of the 2021 season and you see that Mike Tomlin is the only black head coach standing.
Well, number one, it's sad. And number two, so this is my sort of my belief on the whole situation. Okay, if we know that the majority of the coaches are players or former players, correct? Especially head coaches have had former experience in the NFL one way or the other. You don't have to be good, you don't have to be great, but I don't know the exact percentage, but I would be willing to bet it's 85 or higher, and I'm willing to bet it's even higher, that head coaches are former players. Now, if the former players are mostly black, then why aren't the head coaches mostly black? And I'm like, okay, so something is definitely not right when you see 95% of these players are white or coaches are white and 85 whatever percent of the players are black. There's an incongruency here, and that's always been my thought, was exactly that. So how do you change it? That's beyond me. I know that the Rooney Rule was there probably as like here, take this and we'll do this. But do the teams actually follow it? I don't think so, because then we would see a change, and there's been no change.
Bill, give us the real talk. What's the deal? Mike Tomlin is the deal, and I think that's a credit to the organization. Had he not been with the Steelers, who knows? But anyway,
yeah, he might not even be head coach right now if he wasn't with the Steelers.
Your thoughts, Bill?
So there's a place where you get to as any team that's sort of looking at what you have. What's left, I guess, if you're looking at your roster, you're going through, is the arrow pointed upward on this player? Plateaued, pointing down. And I think smart teams do the same thing with their coaches, coaching staff, and front office people, right? Is this person getting better? Are they arrow pointing upward? Is they plateaued, or is the arrow pointing down? In the case of, who was the last player you asked about?
No, I'm asking about Mike Tomlin being the only black head coach left.
Well, yeah. So yeah, 1 of 32 is, we're at 94% basically white head coaches. That's not awesome, because it would be higher if it weren't for Coach Rivera, keeping it from being even
No,
worse.
we're only talking about black coaches now.
No, I understand. I'm just saying that, like, it's not great. It comes down to a very simple thing. It comes down to the fact that the coaching pools of offensive coordinators particularly are also almost all white. And since there's only a handful of black offensive coordinators, Byron Leftwich and, of course, Eric Bieniemy being the primary ones in the NFL now, they are our best chance, our best hope to try to bump the number up a little bit. But it's very simple, that teams are still chasing a picture they have in their minds. I keep thinking of that draft day picture of Cliff Kingsbury, with the loafers, no socks. And I mean, literally, he looks like he's in like the opening, like the credits of, the opening credits have just rolled or whatever, and the movie's about to begin. And it's about the life of like an up and coming Hollywood agent, or, that's what it looks like, right? He looks like this guy who's like a Hollywood movie star. And he's associated with, sort of lumped together with this bunch of young geniuses, right? McVay is sort of lumped together with them, and to some extent Kyle Shanahan, and a bunch of others. And some of them, the ones I just mentioned, have had a lot of success. However, some of these other young geniuses have had less success. Now, Zachary Taylor, of course, didn't have Joe Burrow much of last year, so he didn't look quite as much of a genius. But he looks like a genius this year, right? That tremendous turnaround there. But some of these guys have not done quite so well. I mean, just ask any Bears fan. There was practically a parade when Matt Nagy was fired. The fact is that it is very easy, not very easy. It's hard for anybody, but it's much easier for young white coaches who have the association with somebody like McVay or Shanahan, whatever, one of the other bright young white head coaches that everybody wants the next version of. And so when I think about a guy like Jim Caldwell, who managed to go 10-6 with the Detroit Lions, and what did that earn him? A pink slip.
Yeah.
When I think about that, I mean, they should have a statue of Jim Caldwell outside the stadium. You went 10-6.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's been a while since somebody's gone 10-6 in Detroit. People, look it up. It's been a minute. It's clear that there is a sharp, defined double standard. To be a black head coach, and David Culley did masterwork to get to 5-12, which sounds funny, but I mean, look at that roster.
Yeah.
I mean, he should. I mean, maybe not a statue, but maybe a little extra raise in his pay packet or whatever. He was one of the lowest paid head coaches. Well, not lowest, but lower half, I think. And when I think about what he did, right? I mean, going 5-12 with that roster, to me, is super impressive. The development of Davis Mills is super impressive. And for him not to be brought back, to me, is shocking. Shocking. Yes, the NFL has a problem, and it's had a race problem amongst, well, I mean, not just coaching, it's in the front office as well, forever, like since the inception of the league. And they haven't fixed it, and they've made some attempts, some wholehearted, but most of them half-hearted. And it won't be fixed until, one, there's a really strong inducement. Like, they've kind of played around with incentivizing it. But yeah, if you hand a team like an extra second-round draft pick or something, like something a little more sizzle to it, some of this stuff will start to change.
Okay.
Now, what about, just to, if I can ask a question, what do you guys think as far as the influence of how many per ratio do we have getting interviewed? And that might also have a problem too. If you have 8 white people and only 1 black person interviewed, chances are that it's going to go to a white person. So is that a problem? Or is going on, or that kind of thing?
It's definitely a problem, because just because you interview doesn't mean that you have to hire. And then, like, you don't want to get to the point where it's a mercy hire.
Sure. Yeah. No. Right. No.
Or it's a hire, that doesn't fit your team. I understand that you still are in the business of winning.
Sure.
And that you want the best for your organization. I do find it rather refreshing that we see more black men in the front office.
Yes.
But even from the front office, it does take a certain amount of time when you have that stigma attached. I mean, when you have, it is a business, and you can only regulate it so far. But just like anything else, when you talk about a hiring and a hiring policy, and then implementing it, just because you have a hiring policy doesn't always mean that you implement it correctly, but you implement it to the best, to the advantage of whatever organization that you are a member of. So
Sure.
I think, Bill, what's your thoughts on that? Do we need more interviews? I mean, I don't think necessarily that that's the answer, but what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, the answer is everything. You got to throw everything at it. I think you have to give teams incentives. I think you have to punish teams that do not do a better job of bringing in potential, candidates of color. I think you have to stock more, young people in the pipeline, including, I think they should expand the existing Fritz Pollard Alliance internship initiative, and I think they should, frankly, put more money behind it because the opportunities are interesting. However, there's not to get too deep into why it is that it's easier for young white coaches to work for nothing than a lot of young black coaches to work for nothing. The first job you get in the NFL, people almost brag about the suffering, about, oh yeah, we had to live 2-bedroom apartment and we beans, and like they almost brag about how horrible it was. And a lot of young black coaches have families, right? A lot of young black coaches are single earners, but they may not have a spouse that works. So, or rich parents or whatever it is that allows some of these younger white coaches the ability to make nothing in their first quality control job.
Yep. That's a good point.
The NFL is and let's just say whatever, we're here now. Nepotism is rampant.
Yes.
In
Yeah,
NFL.
yeah,
Rampant. If you ever get bored, just check to see how many coaches and front office people are related by blood or marriage to somebody else in the NFL. The number will blow your little mind.
yeah.
Anyone want to guess what Matt Eberflus's connection is to the Bears in terms of blood or marriage or whatever?
No.
Whatever. His sister is married to one of the McCaskies. So there's all these. I mean, it's all throughout the NFL. I mean, some of them are obvious. We can see lots of father-son: Steve Belichick, Bill Belichick, Kyle and Mike Shanahan. But there's a long list of those where it's just an obvious, Adam Zimmer, Mike Zimmer. I mean, there's a bunch of them. Like it's like bring your kid to school day, or bring your kid to work day gone awry. So many NFL coaches just bring their kids in, and some of them are terrific. I mean, Kyle Shanahan's a great, but some of them aren't.
Yeah.
NFL owners too. So from father to son.
Yeah, we've talked about, I mean, the Jones family, good thing, how many, the Kraft family, same
Now,
thing.
to his credit, Stephen Jones and Will McClay have fixed a lot of the Cowboys' earlier drafting problems, but for everyone,
I'm just speaking of the nepotism part of it.
No, I am too. Yeah. I'm saying, despite the fact that there have been some success stories, there have been loads of utter failures, and they keep getting additional chances, right? While Jim Caldwell just sits by the phone for another chance to coach after being the most successful coach in Detroit since, I think, Wayne Fonts would be, by my math, about 31 or 30 years ago or something crazy.
At least 30 years.
Yeah, 30 at least. I think slightly over 30 years ago, the last time somebody managed to be 10-6.
We'll have to ask Demetrius when we get him back on.
I'm sure he'll know right off the bat. He'll know right off the bat. But the point I was attempting to make is that college has this problem, right? The FBS programs are less than 10% black head coaches. And the Power 5, it's even worse. I mean, it's bad. Yeah. Thank God for Mel Tucker, who is actually, I think, the second highest now. Unless somebody else got a raise. Somebody else may passed him up. But at one point, for a moment in time, he was the second highest paid coach after only Saban. But it's a problem because when you don't feed the machine, right, in terms of putting young people into the back end of the machine, right, you can't get grown-up, full-fledged head coaches and front office people coming out of the front of the machine, right? If you keep feeding so-and-so's son-in-law, so-and-so's frat brother's son, so-and-so's uncle, nephew, or so-and-so's cousin, so-and-so's, so-and-so's brother, sister-in-law's younger brother, or whatever, that if you keep shoving the same sort of candidates into the back end, you can't be shocked when the same candidates come out of the front end. Like, it's not that difficult a problem. You're feeding into the machine the same guys with the same haircuts, right? Who kind of look vaguely like each other, even into the back of the machine. And then when you get those guys coming out of the front, I mean, it's simple. Put more different types of candidates into the machine, and you'll get eventually more of those people hired on the front end.
Let's talk about the playoffs, guys. Great question, though, Mike.
Thank you.
Under the most duress to win entering the division round, Rodgers or Brady, Mike?
I think Rodgers, because I don't think Rodgers is going to be with Green Bay, so it's all going to probably be about that paycheck. And the farther he goes into the playoffs, the more money he's probably going to make. I mean, he's already going to bust the bank anyways, but this is cherry on top of the whipped cream, on top of the pie, on top of the crust, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I would say Rodgers has the most will be the most duress to win this week.
Mahomes or Allen?
I think Allen, because Mahomes has done it before. So Allen hasn't. Allen, failed last year at this time, the divisional playoffs, and if he continues to fail, especially against Mahomes, because they lost to the Chiefs last year, and it could be that nemesis. So once you sort of like Steve Young winning the Super Bowl, get the monkey off the back, and if he can beat Mahomes now, then he sort of beat the nemesis that already took advantage of him last season.
Bill, Mahomes or Allen?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to be very dull and agree with Mike on all of these. But here's what I will say. I truly believe, in terms of the pressure of the moment, Allen, in terms of the pressure of when the game starts, who has to – actually, I guess that's still Allen. Actually, now think about it, has to do more to get their team there. I guess that's also Allen. So, yes, it's definitely Allen, I guess, in terms of he really is the straw that's – I mean, they both are the straw that stirs the drink. But the offensive structure and the offensive talent for the Chiefs are superior. So, yes, definitely Allen. And then for a lot of the similar reasons, Brady is surrounded by a ludicrous amount of talent, even without Antonio Brown and even without
Leonard Fournette. We kind of go on here.
And even without, right, but
Rodgers has got Devontae Adams. He's still got Rodgers.
Rodgers, they both have the quarterbacks, obviously. If they didn't have the quarterbacks, wouldn't be here. But, okay, and he has two really good running backs in Jones and Dillon, but he really has just one wide receiver worth mentioning, and his tight ends are a bunch of Mercedes Lewis is a terrific blocker and a great glue guy, use one of my terms I like to throw out there. Great in the locker room. Young guys look up to him, but he's 37, I think, or something. And he wasn't exactly a speed burner. He was like 4.88 when he was coming out. So he's probably about 5 flat now. So he's truly just a possession guy. Equanimeous St. Brown is a project they're still holding on hope for. Alan Lazard is another big-bodied guy who comes up with the occasional big play, but he's not exactly a consistent threat. And the law firm of Marquez Valdez and Scantling, is another guy that they really think is going to eventually develop into their number 2 receiver, but it hasn't happened yet, really. So their number 2 receivers are really running backs, you know. So and the tight end position, because of the injury to Tanyan, has really been, you know, I mean, they throw the ball to tight ends sometimes, but it's not. They don't have any real threats there. So the talent advantage, even with the injuries, still goes to Tampa Bay when it comes to receivers, as crazy as that sounds. Because in Tyler Johnson, in Scottie Miller, and in Cyril Grayson, that's still at least the equal of the other guys we talked about. And though Mike Evans isn't talked about as an elite wide receiver, he is an elite wide receiver. I don't know why people don't talk about him more. His career numbers are ludicrous, like almost Randy Moss-esque, and people don't talk about it enough. He's having a Hall of Fame career, and why people don't talk about it as much as they should, I'll never understand. The tight end check mark goes enormously to Tampa Bay. Their second best tight end is better than Tampa Bay's best tight end. Cameron Brate would be so much better than any tight end that they can suit up for Green Bay. And the running backs are not quite as good. I'll give the running back check mark to Green Bay, but both Keyshawn Vaughn and Giovanni Bernard are very versatile and dynamic, smaller, but dynamic and versatile backs who can make you miss in the open field and have a little more power than people realize. They're good backs. Like, don't let maybe the lack of sizzle around their names fool you. They're really good. So Tampa Bay still has more talent. They have more talent on defense, slightly, and more talent on offense. Well, thanks to the injuries, slightly. They used to have way more talent on it. But thanks to Antonio Brown taking off in the injuries, it's now a slight talent advantage. But obviously, Aaron Charles Rodgers needs to win this, both for the reasons that Mike mentioned, but mostly because he's about to be put on the Favre list. Oh, he's really great. He only won 1 Super Bowl. Right? I mean, Peyton Manning had to get more than one for people to stop badgering him about
it. Sticking with that duress, the Bills D or the Rams D, Bill?
The Bills D or the Rams D? Well, I mean, it's funny. The Bills D certainly has the better numbers. If you're looking at statistics, the Bills D is the better D. The Rams D has been inconsistent, but they have a lot of playmakers. I mean, I'm going to say the Bills D just because it's way more consistent.
What do you think, Mike? The Bills D against the Chiefs or the Rams D against Tampa Bay?
Yeah, I think both defenses are going to have to play a big role. I like the Rams D, their defensive front, more than I like the Bills defensive front.
Yep.
I like the Bills linebackers and secondary more than I like the Rams linebackers and secondary. So, and then the Chiefs defense is pretty good too on the pass. So a lot of defensive to go around. So I'm going to go with the Bills D and then also the Rams D in those contests. But I take the Bills D over the Rams D if I had to adopt a defense.
Now, both Mahomes and Allen are both coming off of 5 TD performances. Mike, who wins the battle of the young guns?
I'm going to go with Josh Allen in this. I think Buffalo is going to go into Kansas City and win. They're just really just on fire. Chiefs are on fire too, but it's always difficult to continue to push forward. Every time you're in the playoffs, you again and again and move forward, especially when you've done it and you've won it. That hunger sort of goes away, and I think that's going to be the difference in this game is that the Bills are just more hungrier.
Bill, who wins the battle of the young guns?
Well, I think if you're just talking about statistics, Josh Allen wins the statistical battle. However, I think that the Chiefs are going to force more turnovers and get a couple of short fields and get some quote unquote cheap touchdowns and pull this game out. I truly believe that Josh Allen will do some truly heroic things, but some of those things will be too heroic and will end up in turnovers. But yeah, so give me Mahomes. And while hunger is cool and everything, there's something about having been there before that helps teams to weather these storms. And I like the experience of the Chiefs. And most importantly, I think their defense is going to force, like I said, a couple key turnovers.
Here's something interesting, guys, because I truly believe that both of these quarterbacks will throw at least one interception. But I do think that when it comes to the battle of the turnovers, I think that the Chiefs will return a pick six, whereas it might be at the end of the game when Buffalo gets their interception. But I think Patrick Mahomes continues his dominance over the Bills here. We'll see. Thankfully, Demetrius wasn't here tonight. I had my plate of crow sitting over here talking about Matt Stafford. But so next week, I guess Mike, I'll have a plate of crow over here for Josh. So but tonight I can feed it to the cat. I don't have to eat it.
There you go. You don't have
to. So thank you, Demetrius. It's but I had it prepared, had it already, had all the condiments and everything. So rankings say that the Titans are the worst number one team since 1983. I don't know, Mike. Were you born in 1983? Anyway, but will the Bungles run continue in Tennessee, Mike, or not?
I think it does. And yes, I was born in 72. But yeah, the Cincinnati, unfortunately, the Bungles are going to continue marching through. Derrick Henry, I don't know how much ready he's going to be. I think he will play, but I think it's limited. And their Tennessee defense, as far as the passing defense, is just horrid. And guess what the Bengals do the best offensively? They pass the ball. So I think this will be an interesting game, but Bengals come out ahead.
What's your thoughts on that, Bill?
This is a tough one. This is the toughest one for me of all the. I didn't have much trouble picking all the other games. I pretty much went boom, boom, boom till except for this game. This is the game that gave me trouble. With very little conviction and no bass in my voice whatsoever, I'm going to pick the Titans. And I will be ready, I guess, to consume some Corvus if this turns out, not the way I think. Here's what I think will happen. I do think that they will have a plan to stop Derrick Henry. I think they will largely keep him bottled up. But the cost of that is they will give up some big plays in the passing game. Because you can't defend everything equally, right? If you load up, and I think they will, to stop the run, you're going to give up some deep shots, some big plays in the passing game. I think that's what ends up being the difference. And despite the fact that the Titans do not have that one, oh my God, terrifying pass rusher, they do not. They really don't. They need to find that guy in the draft. And this is a good year for it. But I think they will get enough consistent pressure to keep Joe Burrow from getting comfortable in the pocket. But I think it will be a bit of a shootout. I do think this might be the highest scoring. Everyone's talking about the Bills and Chiefs, but I think the highest scoring game might be this one, actually. I think this might be the shootout. And I just think Tannehill, of all people, makes a heroic play late, maybe with his legs. People forget what a good athlete that guy is.
Mm-hmm.
And he makes the play that pulls it out late.
Well, it's the Bungles, guys. I'm not a Titan fan, but I think it comes to an end here in Tennessee. And once again, I'm not a big Tennessee fan. I had no idea that they were the worst number one seed since
Yeah, I mean, that's
1983.
crazy.
I think that's an exaggeration, quite frankly.
Well, that's what the rankings say. Now, it's written in was it
The
ESPN?
rankings.
I think it was ESPN. I read it, and that's where I got the question from.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
It makes sense, though. I mean, the Titans' offense has not been that great. Ryan Tannehill has not been all that great. They've been without Derrick Henry. Their passing defense is miserable. They've won a lot of games by luck, just turnover wise or whatever. And I mean, it's hard to say, okay, since 1983, because that sounds just like a wild stat, but I didn't doubt it either. It's one of those things.
this is a two-part question, Bill. Should the 49er fans be worried about Jimmy G's decision making?
yes.
Yes.
I don't think anybody would argue with that. So there's a second part to the question, I assume.
Yes, it is. What would the 49ers win Saturday due to the MVP status and the possible trade value of Aaron Rodgers, considering he has another first-round exit?
Well, I mean, it wouldn't really hurt it. I mean, he's still Aaron Rodgers. It's not like people are going to suddenly develop amnesia about what he's done this year. What it would do.
When you say what he's done this year, do you mean by alienating most of the sports writers by the way he's talked about one of their fellow guys? Do you mean about
right? But do you
about
think
him being
immunized?
immunized?
Do you think Mark Davis of the Raiders cares about that?
Do I think Mark Davis? No. But Mark Davis might be, there are other organizations. The Raiders.
Oh, right.
I don't know.
Not every organization is going to line up for Aaron Charles Rodgers, but the ones that are interested, no, it will not stop.
No. I mean, hey, if he says he wants to come to Pittsburgh, I'm right there. Come on, son. Come on down. Yeah, I agree with you, but also, I mean, would I turn down Russell Wilson? Hell no. I kind of agree with you, Bill, because I want to see what kind of what happens with some of the fallout from some of the other things that he's done off the field, and if that plays a lot on the field. But for this particular question, you don't think that if he lost again in the first round, well, do you think he would go back to Green Bay?
I mean, it's not impossible. I get the feeling they've been sort of both edging back towards each other. I think it could happen, but there'll be a market for him. The two teams that popped in my head most immediately are both Denver and the aforementioned Raiders. If the Raiders move on from Derek Carr, they'll have the cap space, they'll have the need, and they feel like, I mean, they were a playoff team, they feel like they're an elite level quarterback away from being a Super Bowl contender. Are they right about that? Perhaps not, but they believe it. So there'll be phone calls made. I mean, like if Aaron Charles Rodgers goes out and throws 6 interceptions in that game and loses the game almost exactly by himself, guess what? His phone will still ring, James. Like there are people that are not going to suddenly be like, oh, forget that. We don't want him anymore. No. If he has the worst game you've ever seen in your life, his phone will still ring. Trust me.
What's your thoughts on that, Mike? But also, will Jimmy G's phone ring too?
Yes, I think that Jimmy G's is going to be a starter somewhere. He'll play the role of the bridge quarterback. As far as the value of Aaron Rodgers, I agree with Bill. He's far beyond proven who he is as a quarterback. As far as the MVP, though, I think if he goes out and has a bad game, then Tom Brady wins the MVP. because of exactly what you were saying, Jim. The as far as being just a nuance to the press, and this fact that he's his immunization stuff, and just being an asshole,
There you go.
So it's yeah, I think this will give the writers every bit of a right to say we're not going to vote MVP for Aaron Rodgers if he goes out and has a bad game.
I'm going to go kind of completely off subject here. I mean, we're not ones that really follow the guidelines of what time we end this show anyway. But a lot of talk about Derek Carr. A lot of talk about stopgap quarterbacks. What about Carr in the Steelers uniform next year, Bill?
Yes, please. I mean, I don't know how else to say that. I mean, the idea of getting a younger, more mobile, stronger arm quarterback, where's the catch? Even with the team we have, I mean, with the same team otherwise, which of course won't be the same team because other players will be moving on and they'll have new guys coming in the draft.
Deontay Johnson will still be there. Najee Harris will still be there.
Right. But I'm saying if all you
what's
did,
what's his name? The tight end, the young kid that just.
I mean, Freiermuth is one of the brightest. Yeah. But I'm saying that if you were to just this year, even if you were at the beginning of the season have swapped Roethlisberger out and swapped Carr in, this is a team that wins at least 2 more games. I mean, this is at least an 11-6 team just by dropping in Derek Carr. So, I mean, he can make plays with his feet. He can drive the ball deep down the field. Now, people complain about him being risk averse, and I'm not going to say that there's not some truth to that, but some of that also is to whom should he have been throwing the ball deep? I mean, with the exception of Fraction Jackson, right? With the exception of Deshaun Jackson, who ended up having to replace Mr. Ruggs. I mean, Ruggs was an inconsistent rookie even before his legal problems. They don't have a lot of deep threats. I mean, probably the primary sort of legitimate deep threat that he's really is their tight end, Darren Waller, who Carr does a good job of getting the ball to. And then I guess, Deshaun Jackson sort of at the tail end of his career, but the rest of their receivers are sort of the same kind of guy in terms of they're route runners who work the middle of the field and have good hands, but are not really a threat to run away from anybody. Zay Jones is a slightly above average athlete. Edwards is a dead-on average athlete at the wide receiver position. And, people talk about the accountant or people talk about all the little nicknames they have for Renfro. He's a really good route runner, and quick, very quick, but he's not a guy who's just going to blow past people. No. So driving the ball deep outside the numbers is something he can do, and I bet if you gave him receivers that's their real strength, I bet you'd see him do it more.
What do you think, Mike? David Carr, good fit or bad fit in the Steeler country?
Yeah, I think Carr is a good fit, but I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a better fit. I don't know if Carr wants that weather in Pittsburgh where, so he's never been around it as far as a longevity. And I think Jimmy Garoppolo is probably the better fit for that situation.
What are your thoughts on that, Bill?
Well, the only reason I'm going to disagree is that I think the record for Jimmy Garoppolo is 13 games. Is that his record for games he's played in the season?
Yeah,
it could be. I'm not 100% sure.
I think it's either 13 or 12.
Yeah, I keep thinking the records for him is 13 games he's managed.
He had 16 in 2019, and
there we go. Good for him. Okay, so he did have 1 year where he started all 16 games. But Carr is clearly the more durable of the two, and I feel like they're pretty close together in pretty much everything except slightly stronger arm for Carr and slightly more mobile and slightly more durable. So If I can get the slightly more durable, slightly more mobile guy with a slightly stronger arm, I'm taking it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I don't know if I would turn down either one as a stopgap.
Oh, I would not turn down either one. No,
Yeah,
I didn't say that.
yeah. No, I'm just saying. I'm like you. I'd rather have Carr, even though I'm not really a big Carr fan. But as far as for our scheme, I would rather have Carr. But if either one of them came, I would not be mad as a stopgap method. Bill, Stafford got his first playoff victory last week, but does he continue that streak against TB12?
I would love to say yes.
Me too.
I really would. At least partially in honor of my friend Demetrius Verges, who I know loves Stafford. I'd love to see that happen. They scare me. The Rams scare me. They're what the heck? I'll go ahead and pick an upset and get ready, get my crow bib in case. Yeah, what the heck? I'll pick the Rams. Shake it up, make it interesting. The Rams worry me, as I said. They are capable of looking like absolute world beaters, and they're also capable of looking like a team that is very lucky to even be in the playoffs. Like capable of looking really, really good when they look good. And a lot of that is Stafford. Not all of it, but a lot of that is. It's not all Detroit. He's been inconsistent, even going back to college. He's a guy that can look amazing, like top 5 quarterback in the league, amazing for stretches. And then other times he looks like a guy who is a starter, but nowhere near the top tier. And he can do that on alternate plays. And Thomas Edward Patrick Brady is, one of the most consistent quarterbacks, maybe the most consistent quarterback in terms of longevity and being the sort of maintaining the same level of play for the longest time. I mean, he is. He's the new standard. He's how you will now measure other quarterbacks in terms of being able to stay at a high level for a long time, because no one's done it this long before. Everything he does is a new standard.
Yep.
He's doing things that people don't do. It's crazy. But I'm going to just say that that defensive front of the Rams have a game for the ages and harass and bother and pester Thomas Edward Patrick Brady all day long, and he looks human.
What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I agree. The Buccaneers' offensive line is struggling a little bit with injuries, and that's kind of the last thing you want when you're facing a Rams defensive front as talented as that is. And how do you get Tom Brady? You sack him, you rush him, you pressure him, and then he's going to turn the ball over, and he's not going to look like the classic Tom Brady that he always is. So with the offensive line having troubles, with that defensive front from the Rams, I think they get after Tom Brady consistently, and the Buccaneers make mistakes in that passing game. Plus, as we talked about, who's there offensively outside of Mike Evans? That's not. I mean, you throw Jalen Ramsey on Mike Evans, and what do you have? So, I really think this defense, more so than Stafford, wins this game for the Rams. But the Rams do win this game.
I'm going the other way. Well, of course, I have my, once again, I'm going to insert my little personal prejudices in here because I do not have the confidence in Stafford. I think the Stafford that we saw in Detroit is the real Stafford. I don't, I mean, he's with a better team. He's with better weapons. I understand all that. But I'm thinking there's some bulletin board material here between Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. So I'm looking for that rematch. So just for that particular fact, I'm thinking the Bucs are going to meet the Packers at some time. So I'm going with the Bucks in this one. Mike, as always, glad to see you. Glad to have you. Bill, I'm going to let you give your final thoughts first, and then Mike, you can take us home.
So, well, my final thoughts deal specifically with something that we've said earlier in the day about the fact that we're now down to one black head coach in the NFL. And it's easy to say, and I hear people constantly say, well, why do we have to address race? Why do we have to talk about it? Why do we, can't we just let these people hire whoever they think is best? Well, I mean, we can't stop them. These are privately held corporations, and very many of them are family owned. But the reason that we don't just leave it alone and we don't stop talking about it is because football, more than I believe any other of our American sports, reflects the reality of what America is like. I think football is like American, that is sexy and violent and funny, and they like to say football is family, or I'll at least say that it creates families, right? And tugs at certain family feelings that we have, right? And
Nice tabby there, Mike.
and,
I see the tab you put in her.
yeah.
It's usually my cat. Tonight it was yours.
Thank you. I got
What?
4 of them, so they take control of the household.
Go
ahead, Bill.
I was going to say that our locker rooms are a little bit of a microcosm of America, right? That it brings these people very often from very different backgrounds together, try to accomplish a single goal. And leadership matters, and how that leadership has been raised, how that leadership has been nurtured and cultivated matters. And having an NFL not just at the bottom, but at the top that reflects what the league really is like matters, because there are things that happen, right? We've talked about how the NFL is having to challenge the way that prospects are questioned during the pre-draft process. And those questions, many of them, happen because the people involved in the questioning process do not have an understanding, empathy, compassion, or experience with being part of the underclass, with being a person who truly has known struggle. And so they ask questions about people's mothers that are unbelievably offensive, that you could never ask in any other job interview situation. We have a pervasive problem in the NFL with properly not only identifying, but rewarding and promoting Asian, Hispanic, and obviously Black candidates. The fact that this is still an issue, and people love to say what year it is, well, now it's 2022. Not only is it an issue, but the issue isn't getting better, right? It'd be one thing if we could say, oh, here's a chart showing all the great progress, and it's going up and up and up. No, the chart isn't great. The chart is sad, right? 2 out of 32, right? If you count Rivera and you count, I mean, obviously, I mean, with Flores having been fired and Cully having been fired, we have now amongst head coaches of color, we have, well, I guess Robert Saleh is an Arab American or Muslim American. So I guess I'll say 3. 3 out of 32 is still less than 10%. It's insane that we're talking about less than 10% in America in the year 2022. That is my final thought.
Just to kind of tail in on that, Bill, it's 2022, and my right to vote is as much at stake now as it was in 1965.
Correct.
So, Mike, your final thoughts.
I think we're what Bill's talking about, I think it's very important. And if we go back and just look at it, the Archel was the second black head coach hired in the NFL. And that was in 2006. And he was the only head coach. So if we are looking forward and trying to think that things are better 15 years, 16 years from then, how many black head coaches do we have in the NFL? One. And it's just like that is not the forward progress that I think a lot of people think is going on. And a lot of it has to do with the youth and the handing the sort of the championing of the youth and having them, speak loudly and talk about the situations that are present and what they see. And in a few days, we have the recent Senior Bowl, and it's one of those things where it starts with them too. We all have to figure out the youth, people who are in the middle of it, and the people who are elderly, advanced in doing this. We need to sort of figure it out together and solve this problem, whether it's, just more people of color being as Bill is pointing out, Black, Asian, Puerto Rican, Mexican, whatever it is. We need more of it because that's how we learn and how we grow. And until that happens, then we're just going to continuously shoot ourselves in the foot and not make any progress, because how can you make progress if there's not people around us teaching us the better ways?
Well, hey, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Bill. Look forward to talking to you guys next week. Hopefully Demetrius will be back with us. Maybe Don will be able to join in. Have a great night. Looking forward to talking to the audience next week. And don't forget to tune in right here to the Sports Crib. See you next week, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great night.
Have a great night, everybody.
Monday, Bill?
Probably. Yeah, probably.